Now, if you're at Disney, they would have had you go all the way to one side to make room for the other people. In this case, the other people wouldn't have showed, so you did exactly the right thing. So that's a good thing. You know, I was talking to Vicki a few weeks back, and she said, you know, I'd really like for you to take a few minutes and speak if you could. I've been with the Kellogg Company for almost 30 years. I'm actually going to be retiring at the end of the year. January 5th will be my last official day, and I'm excited to go off and do something different. But in my time at the company, I've done a lot of different things. I've led our analytics organization. I've led our data group, our global data office. Started in sales back in Greenville, Mississippi, and in a totally different time. In fact, I often ask a trivia question when I get started with a speech. I mean, how many Walmart stores do you think were in my little sales territory when I started with the company almost 30 years ago in Greenville, Mississippi? And people always guess, well, if you had 100 stores, you probably had 10, you probably had 15, but I had 0. And what I'm talking to you about today is I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of the Kellogg Company, and then I want to talk a little bit about how companies like ours found ourselves where we are, which is not a very comfortable place. And then how are we going to get out of it? What's it going to take? What do we have to do to be different? So that's kind of the thrust of the conversation. I hope it will resonate with you. And some of the things I'm going to talk about, I know that I'm preaching to the choir, so to speak, because you're analytics professionals, you're data professionals, and what I'm going to speak to you about today is really going to reinforce the need and how important that is, and maybe even get to some answers to some of the questions that you were talking about why companies struggle. Why is it hard for analytics to really get its seat at the table? So we'll see how that goes. W.K. Kellogg founded our company back in 1906. Battle Creek, Michigan. We're still there today. Thriving metropolis of about 50,000 people that you do not want to visit in January, February, or March. I'll just tell you that right now. And Kellogg is still basically known as a cereal company, a global company, but we actually operate very regionally. So our 4 regions, Europe, Latin America, Asia Pacific, and North America, operates very independently and autonomously. And it actually is part of the problem that we have as we try to unlock analytics across the organization, because the siloing of data, the autonomy you have within a function or within a region makes it very difficult to really incorporate broad-based change. W.K. Kellogg's signature is still our company logo, and he was a brilliant businessman. In fact, we're going to talk a little bit about disruptors and disrupted. He was really a disruptor. He changed the game for breakfast. And he grew the company through brand building, through marketing, innovation, acquisition. He used all of the tools he had at his disposal to take the Kellogg Company into a really unique place at that period in time. I think that what's interesting about him is he also had a people side of it. I mean, when he said, well, hey, we've weathered several periods when times weren't good, he went through the Depression, he actually did things that were unique. He actually cut people's hours so he could employ more people during the Depression. And he was a brilliant marketer. He was a little bit unorthodox in that he had wives wink at the grocer to get a free box of cornflakes, probably caused some problems in some marriages, I would guess, as she's winking at the grocer, and there weren't a lot of those kinds of things that took place. But he increased his advertising budget during the Great Depression. I don't think he had an ROI for that, but it worked out. It's part of our problem, and we'll talk a little bit about that. He understood manufacturing, and he understood scale. The company held a number of patents on manufacturing process. And they really forged some new trails in this arena. And understanding scale was very, very important. And we'll talk a little more about that as well. And he expanded globally very early. He understood how important it was to get ubiquity, to get his brands in front of as many people as possible. He invested his money in people. We have the K values. We've got a very strong culture of being nice across our organization of about 30,000 people. And we still recruit today. We'll talk a little bit about how we're trying to recruit in the analytics space. And a number of acquisitions over the last several years, which have helped us kind of bring ourselves into this new century. So with all of that, some of the brands. So with all of that, here we are, a company about $14 billion in revenue, kind of a small, big company. We're in the consumer packaged goods industry. We know how to do it. We've been doing it over 100 years. 30,000 people, 16 food categories, paid 371 dividends since 1925. Well, then what happened? Why did we find ourselves the last few years in a situation where we couldn't grow revenue? Business processes didn't seem to work the way they did once before. It's because today is different. Things have changed. While we were busy delivering today, and if anyone tells you that a company of our scale isn't busy trying to deliver today, they're telling you a story. Because most of what you measure is the recent trends, what's happening right now, where are we delivering the quarter? Our people are incented that way, our executives are incented that way, and it's all about delivering now. It's the trap. But while we were busy focusing on today, the world around us was changing. And as you guys know this, I'm just going to build it out because there's been 3 great revolutions of modern times, and you are right in the middle of the digital revolution. And while we were busy delivering today, the world around us was changing, and we were too inside out to notice. Consumer trends were changing. Our business processes we had created internally were inside out. And the world around us is changing rapidly. Each of these have built on its predecessor, right? The technology revolution was enabled by the Industrial Revolution, and the digital revolution, which we couldn't really see coming until a few years ago, was enabled by the technology revolution. And we're right in the middle of one of the most transformative periods in our times. And so you know what this is. This is where I'm preaching to the choir. You understand what the digital revolution is all about. It's this convergence of massive quantities of data, technologies that are accelerating, mobility, ubiquity. It's all an explosion the big companies weren't ready for. Let me take that back. Mature big companies weren't ready for. Companies who thought they had all the answers. We're good at this. We could thump our chest. We've got great brands. We know how to do it. We don't really need to listen out there. We've got all the answers, but we didn't have all the answers. What we didn't realize is that data is running the world. And there's a reason that the most valuable companies in the world today are information companies who have learned how to harvest the data, share the data, leverage the data. And that's what we didn't get. There's a lot of issues that comes with being inside out and building your own processes, right? Because you adopt a mindset over the years that says, since we're very good at this and we know how to do this, let's just get this done. And rather than go outside to see how the rest of the world may be doing something, we build a process. We hire somebody, we put them in a role, figure this out, get it working, and that's the way we do it. But somewhere along the way, you find out that the rest of the world doesn't necessarily do it that way. And then unwinding all of that is very, very difficult and complicated. So data is running the world. And this transparency, this massive acceleration of change, all of this availability of information is making it very disruptive, not only for our industry, but for all industries, because the old rules simply don't apply. The things that we grew up with, the things that our leaders learned, and the way they were trained, those rules, they don't work so well anymore. So we talked about scale. W.K. Kellogg, you understood scale. That's fantastic. Scale, right? That gives you that competitive advantage in a marketplace. Advertise and they will buy. One up, one down is good enough. I'm going to talk about these just for a second, each one of them. ROI rules today. I thought that was really interesting. How many people don't measure the ROI on analytics? Probably because they don't know how. Or can you really measure it if some other function is getting the credit for the savings or the revenue growth, right? Because it can only go in the budget one place. It's one of our traps. And it's right by us. It's right by us. It's really about those inside-out processes that it worked, we did it, we know it, and that's the way we're going to do it, and it's not good enough anymore. And yes, for us, a huge catalyst for us is trade promotions, where we interact with retailers to fund and incent purchases by our consumers through trade promotions, trade investments, trying to build a display and pay for it or buy down a price. It's not enough anymore. So let's talk about scale. What we have found over the last few years is that scale doesn't work. We are built for scale. We do big things really, really, really well. When we get ready to make 250,000 cases of Frosted Flakes, we zoom. We do it great. But the world doesn't necessarily need 250,000 cases of Frosted Flakes the way we were set up to produce anymore. They might want 250,000 cases of Frosted Flakes, but they might want it in 250 different package types. That's a problem when you've got an infrastructure built for scale. Okay? It doesn't work. The trend toward individual, unique offerings, I want my own thing, doesn't work for us when we have an infrastructure built for scale. This is a problem that everyone in our space is struggling with right now. So what do? How do you become flexible and adaptable to this kind of trend when you've got an infrastructure that's built for scale and it's going to take hundreds of millions of dollars to change it in a period of time where you're struggling growing revenue and you're trying to add margin as rapidly as possible to appease the street? That's a really tough place to be. Advertise and they will buy. There was once upon a time a picture that you could see. It's like something out of a black and white, series on TV from 1960 where you see the family sitting around with their two children watching TV on one of three channels. And they were a captive audience. They were easy to get to, right? So if we advertised and we bought those networks, we were going to reach the masses. We were going to give them our message. And it was pretty easy to build a brand if you had the capital and the resources to be able to go do that. It was also a barrier to entry to competition, right? If you didn't have something with the scale to be able to appease the market and you didn't have the money or the resources to be able to get into that advertising phenomenon that took place, 50, 60 years ago, you weren't there. You weren't going to be there. So scale in advertising has been affected too. So where do you promote now? When? This omni-channel world that we live in, how do you reach the masses? So we've lost scale in manufacturing. We've also lost scale in advertising the way we reach consumers, which makes it a more expensive proposition. And it removes a barrier to entry for competition. One up, one down is good enough. This is probably more unique to our industry, but as you all as consumers, it's probably very important to you. And what I'm talking about here is a huge issue for food manufacturers that we're dealing with today. Once again, we let the world grow around us. We weren't paying attention probably closely enough. And we found that, the old rules around food traceability don't apply anymore. We were always, if we know where we got it from and they said it's okay and we know where we shipped it to and it's okay there, then we're good enough. That's not good enough anymore. Consumers expect farm to fork. They want visibility and traceability from the point of origin, the farm, all the way to their plate. Now, legally, we're not required to do that, but it doesn't really matter what the legal ramifications are if the consumer expectation is there. So companies like ours have had to embrace this new additional responsibility that says there's a duty to know. We need to be able to provide that information. Totally changes the game for us. Tremendous cost investment to be able to service that. And we're just learning how to do it. Now, one of the things that I think is familiar and similar through all of these things I've talked about so far, and we'll talk about a couple more, is that the data that's generated and the ability to have visibility to it and the analytics that need to be put in place to be able to manage these new processes and these new requirements are tremendous. So I heard a comment about business acumen. You need business acumen. You need to know what the needs of the business are. What I'm sharing with you right now are some fantastic opportunities for analytics to play a major role. ROI rules today. Back to the ROI chart. Again, that was a little comical, but you have to place a few bets. And one of the things I've tried to instill within our organization as a change agent for them for almost 30 years is that sometimes you have to go with your gut on a few things. If you wait for that opportunity to get the ROI back to say, oh yes, that's okay, well let's go do an RFI and then we'll get an RFP and we'll figure out if we can do this and the ROI is going to be X. By the time you get to that point, it's too late, especially in the marketplace today. If you want to seize opportunities, you have to place a few bets. And analytics, I think, is one of those places where if companies still asking, what's the ROI? Am I going to be okay? Then they've probably already missed the boat. Because analytics is about not just solving problems, but it's about growing revenue. And that's just where the companies fall in the trap, because it's about, well, where does it go in the budget? It's going to go revenue, somebody's got to sign up for it. You're going to save costs, somebody's got to give up those funds, and it's a very complicated situation for them. Just trade promotion management, because it's such a huge piece of the consumer packaged goods industry, is that, once again, inside out, these were the things we looked at for years, these 6 big components, and we knew them very well. And we were doing, volumetric lifts 25 years ago, and we were good at it. We knew how much money we could spend and what the price would be and what the response rates would be, and we were good at it. But we never really thought about the consumer and what those trends are, and is this really, do we have all the variables? The whole world for us has changed. And so what I'm trying to give you a message is that what got you here, companies like ours won't get you there. Because of all the changes in the marketplace and the changes that we've seen within organizations, because of the way our executives were trained and the things that they know, they're in a really tough spot. I love this quote. So when Nokia was acquired by Microsoft, their CEO ended his speech by saying, "We didn't do anything wrong. I followed all the rules, but somehow we lost." Leaders were trained and groomed under a different set of rules. We've got to help them. So is your company or product trying to be better? This is something I think that's just kind of funny, so I share it because, I can imagine this conversation going on in boardrooms and meeting rooms all around the country. So whether you're a leader in your organization or you're aspiring to be a leader in your organization, you've probably sat in meetings, especially if you've been in product innovation or if you were ever in any marketing roles. And you can imagine a conversation, something like this. Oh, the upholstery should be leather, let's make it available in more colors, and maybe it's the whole industry, whatever it is. It's about trying to make it different, trying to make it better. But stagecoach still be a stagecoach. You can tint the windows. You can offer it in a different color. So many companies are in this spot right here today. They're still trying to make the products that really worked well better, and they really need to be outside in looking at what does the world need, what is the world demanding, what are consumers wanting, and then they need to be there when they get there. Where is it heading? And I just think that that's kind of fun. I threw this up. I did a master class for this organization back in the spring, and I threw this up because I just think that it's great. This was courtesy of HFS Research, but you look through these lists of questions. The world's most popular media owner creates no content, and then you look at these disruptors. Who would have thought this 20 years ago, right? But that's the way the world is today. That's why I'm talking to you. Because while W.K. Kellogg was a disruptor, Kellogg today, I can assure you, and as much as I love the company, we are not a disruptor. We're being disrupted. How could we forget something like this, right? It's all around us. So when I started in my territory in Little Greenville, Mississippi, about 30 years ago, I had no Walmart stores, but there wasn't even a sparkle in anyone's eye that Amazon was about to take over the world. So disruption comes from everywhere. It's a very uncomfortable place for companies like ours. We are caught in a situation where we're chasing margin, we desire growth, but we still have to play it safe, right? We still are looking at the old rules. We're still trying to put those old, ideals in place around, well, should we do it? What's the ROI? It's just easier for us to take this capacity out when we lose scale. When we lose volume, let's just close a plant, we'll save the cost and pick up the margin versus, well, let's maybe invest and make that more flexible. And what would that world look like if we could respond to those consumer desires that change on a dime? How would we think our way out of that? And so the message to all of you is, after spending a long time in a company that was very mature, very successful, one thing I've tried to do, and I think I've been somewhat successful, is teach the organization to embrace change. You've got to aggressively find your way forward. It won't come from the C-suite. There are very few C-suite executives in mature companies that are going to be bold with aggressively driving change. They're not incented that way. And they may not be there in 5 years when it all clicks. So we have to help them. In our industry, consumers don't believe everything you tell them. They're all special. They're informed. They're smarter than ever. They use that smartphone, which really didn't even exist, just over 10 years ago. And they know more about our products than we do in a lot of cases. That's kind of scary. So what's your strategy? If you're going to really be in the space and you're going to say, okay, it's about products, then great. And if product comes first and they love it, you're going to get their attention with the ubiquity that we have with communications today and the ability to reach so many people through social media and messaging. If they love it, it doesn't take much. But if they don't love it, all that money you spend across all those messages, they're going to block you. Right? If they don't love the product, it doesn't matter. Winners in today's world are consumer-centric. The number one message I would give you, whether you're an analytics professional or a data professional or whatever function you may be in within an organization, is that you have to be outside in. And if you're still inside out, and that's an opportunity area for any analytics function within an organization, is to take the processes that were built inside out and disrupt them. Because they're probably wrong, they're probably not optimal. They may have been optimal for a point in time, but for the last 20 years we did it that way, and it's still being done that way. Winners are consumer-centric, outside in. So it's all about one of those three things. I've always been told that great companies who win and are successful in their sector, have a strategy that's built around one of three things. Consumers are going to love my product, they're going to love my service, or they're going to love my price. And if you think about companies who've been very successful, how many people do you think pre-ordered the recent Apple iPhone upgrades? Right? Tons, millions. Right? People love those products. They can't live without them. And Walmart did what they did and got where they were because people loved their prices. There's tons of examples in each one of those, but these three things have trade-offs: product, service, and price. So you really have to pick one and make it the forefront and the pillar of everything else you do as an organization. And I think most companies forgot this somewhere along the way. They just want to be great for everybody. They want to win in all three, and you probably can't. And if you try, you're probably going to fail because you're going to be spread too thin and it just doesn't work. So think about that. I think that's a very interesting thing. So the great irony is that the company you work for today probably started as a disruptor. If they're successful today, they probably started as a disruptor. But complacency, much like we face in the consumer packaged goods industry, is the biggest enemy of success long term. If we learn how to do it, we did it, we're good at it. And I think that that's very valid in today's world. So how do we break the cycle? We have to innovate. So the four forms of innovation, and we focused on product innovation, right? We're a product manufacturer, consumer packaged goods space. But if we had spent more time maybe thinking about these other three, consumer experience, operational innovation, business model innovation, we probably would be in a different place today. Because I bet as consumers, when we add a different berry to Special K, you probably don't really see that as innovation. Probably not. We do. We measure it that way. Oh, look at our innovation. It's really good. We put a blueberry in it. No. That's not what the world's looking for. But again, inside out, right? We have the capability, we have the infrastructure. Hey, if we can just produce another 100,000 cases of special K, but adding a blueberry to it, look at the value we're going to create for ourselves. You got to focus on all four. Right? Whatever your product may be, your customers are looking for a better experience. How can you drive that? And those inside-out processes are probably keeping you from doing it. And operational innovation, how can we do this differently? And do we just need to change our total model? Is there a place within our organization where we could incubate a different way that we do this? So leverage the data at our disposal, break down the silos. And this is right in line with the questions you guys were asked. Many organizations are still struggling with, well, what is analytics? I have been asked, well, we have a lot of analysts in the company. I think we do analytics pretty well. I would say, we have analysts that shouldn't be called analysts. Okay? We have hundreds, thousands of analysts. They don't analyze anything. They build a report. Right? Or they may talk to a customer on the phone, and we call them a customer service analyst. But they believe we're already doing it. Break that away. Wipe that away. We shouldn't be calling people analysts if they aren't analyzing anything. And they say, well, aren't we doing this already? Then the famous, well, what is the ROI if we do? And obviously, most of the people in this room are still struggling with that question within their organization. What is the ROI if we do? The reality is organizations can't arm themselves with armies of data scientists. There aren't that many available. There's going to be less available to you. It's going to be a very, very challenging space. We'll talk about talent for just a second in a minute. So it's your role as analytics professionals or the data professionals that enable analytics, because the two go hand in hand, to help build this analytics mindset within your organization. It's how you're going to win, right? Because you can't be everywhere all the time. And when we built our enterprise analytics hub, and we actually built it globally, cross-functionally, cross regions, all of a sudden the request very quickly, outstripped the demand or the supply that we had, the ability for us to respond. And companies will prioritize current problems first. I have this many millions of dollars in deductions. I know it's suboptimal. I have 85 people working on it. What can you do to help me with that? It's just the reality. But you have to save some time for these people and some space so that they can actually work on the opportunities that the C-suite's not thinking about. Because that's probably where the biggest opportunity lies. At least that's what we found. So the reality is you have to teach the leaders, you have to share with the organization that we're not going to execute our way out of these problems and these trend changes that we've seen, this disruptive model we're in. We have to think our way out of it. So intellectual curiosity, about almost a year ago, I guess, I gave a speech to the National Professional Science Masters Association. I've been asked to sit on their board for the next 3 years. I'm very honored that they would ask me to do that. And this is an organization that works with master's degree programs across the United States at universities to help define curriculums of emerging trends, data science obviously being one of those. And when they asked me, so what kind of people are you looking for? And I said, well, people with these skills, right? It's great that you've got the math, statistics, the economics, the business acumen, technical skills, but if you don't have the intellectual curiosity, if you don't ask why do we do it that way, nothing's going to change and you're going to be directed versus directing. And I think what I heard in those questions and the questions around compensation and having a seat at the table were more about, well, how do I get there? And I will tell you that thinking your way out of these things and bringing that intellectual curiosity to the table is how you will get there. Because a lot of people have skills. So big picture thinking, but also the ability to connect seemingly unrelated objects, understand the detail. We have executives who still believe that when they see a new point of data, that's an insight. Oh, look here, I have new data. This is an insight. This is great. It's not an insight. It's data. An insight is a previously unknown correlation or causal that you didn't know exist. And that's the magic, right? When you take things that are seemingly unrelated and you connect them and fireworks happen, you say, holy cow, look at this. That's an insight. You have to train them. You have to lead them. So we're looking for people that can fit a square peg in a round hole. If we're going to disrupt, we need to figure out how can we use our existing infrastructure and our model to advance, to grow, ask excellent questions, take risk, and explore, being unbound by the bias. Be unbound by the problems that they're telling you they need you to solve, and also look to explore in the areas where maybe nobody's thought to look yet, because we do it pretty well, right? So the demand is growing exponentially for these talents. You know that this is a recent page from Gartner about data science. 114,000 workforce shortfall by 2022. So one of the things that we are doing here in this space, and I'm wrapping this up because I know I'm about out of time, but we actually, 3 years ago, I led an initiative to create a relationship with our local magnet school, a high school. It's the Battle Creek Area Math and Science Center, who draws the brightest kids from 17 counties into this school, and they focus on math and science. And we started bringing them through our organization, the entire school, to an auditorium, to introduce them to analytics and what this world looks like and what data science is all about. Because these kids, a lot of them love math, but they don't know what to do with it. Right? And they don't know things like this exist. I can assure you, when I was a kid growing up on a farm in Arkansas, I didn't even know jobs like this existed. Right? And now, who would have known? But we connected with them, and we're bringing high school students through as interns in our analytics program now, 4 per semester, 4 for the summer, and introducing them to what this can be. So what's next? Go through this quickly. We're just getting started on this new transformation. You know, IoT, autonomous transportation, the rapidly increasing, exponential increase in social and AI. Customers and consumers are going to be more and more informed. Their expectations are great. They will be greater. Analytics talent, as we said, in short supply. Capability is going to allow more granularity and more detailed analysis than ever before. In other words, it's going to disrupt even more than we think, because this disruption is going to be intense. A lot of the companies that are here today who have been complacent but successful won't be here a few years from now. Just won't. And those kids going into school, if you think it's going to be disruption, part of you probably have heard this statistic, but 65% of children entering grade school this year, when you first walked your child into kindergarten this year, 65% of those kids, when they graduate college, will go into jobs that do not exist today. For those of you who haven't heard that statistic, that's mind-blowing to me. 65% of these kids are going to go into a job that they can't even plan for because it doesn't exist. So, in summary, you know, what got you here is not going to get you there. Companies have to change, and they have to embrace the change. Our leaders need our help. The C-suite, don't wait for them to tell you what they need. They weren't groomed for this. They weren't trained this way. And we start our CEO typically. Now, we've got a new CEO, which came from outside the company. First time ever, if my history has been. We've always grown them and groomed them, right? And we go let them run Guatemala, and then we'll let them run the Caribbean, and then eventually they'll work their way up and they'll be our CEO. But we never trained them for this. Don't fall into this continuous improvement trap. That's not enough. And it's better to be a disruptor than disrupted. Leverage the 4 forms of innovation we talked about. Think our way out of this, because the world's going to change faster over the next 5 than it did over the last 10, and that's saying something. So with that, thank you very much. I appreciate your time and your hospitality, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.